The fight obviously stopped in a horrible way. Give us your thoughts on how it was going.
Well, I say, are you vaccinated? And if they say no, I say, well, I'll see you.
Listen, it was a wild fight for as long as it lasted. I'm sure you'll be back.
Communist, Bolshevik revolutionary, and mass murderer Vladimir Lenin once said, "It is true that liberty is precious, so precious that it must be carefully rationed." The rationing of liberty is always a thing that the totalitarian, authoritarian, communists attempt to do to every single people that they enslave. The freedom of speech doesn't exist in a communist society. If you need any indication at all, that they don't believe in freedom of speech when they ascend to the highest ranks of media and politics in this country, all you need to do is look at what's happening to Joe Rogan right now. Joe Rogan is based. Joe Rogan is the most successful podcaster in the history of podcasting. Joe Rogan has between 11 and 15 million people listening to his podcast, and probably much, much more as of late, based on a recent scandal where Joe Rogan, how dare he, interviewed people who were credentialed medical experts. That's what Joe Rogan does for a living. If you've been living under a rock, Joe Rogan is unequivocally the most listened to man on the planet, and he brought on some, I suppose, controversial figures. Why are they controversial? They're only controversial because they are breaking from the official narrative of COVID-19. Now, you probably listened to Dr. Robert Malone on Rogan's podcast. You probably listened to some of the experts that he's brought on. He's brought on experts from the left and the right. I don't know Joe Rogan personally, but he seems like an incredibly fair arbiter and somebody who's simply searching for the truth. And he has found the truth in so much as millions and millions of people have found him. What scares the media the most is that Joe Rogan's audience is primarily under the age, like 35. He's reaching young people. That means that he's the future, and they're terrified because they don't control him. So what you've seen over the last couple of weeks is that Joe Rogan has been savaged by the tyrants. They hate when somebody has a large audience that they do not personally control, that they cannot flip on and off, that they cannot shove down upon them the prescribed narratives. And Joe Rogan isn't doing what anyone tells him to do. He does whatever the hell he wants to on his show, and it's a thing of beauty. It's refreshing. People love it, and they love the search for truth. All good men do. Reading here from Zero Hedge says that Spotify, in a statement on Sunday, said that it would modify its content, which would put Joe Rogan under a different type of content category. They'd be slapping on potential content advisories to his podcasts and telling people that maybe Joe Rogan's show is misinformation. Now, why is this relevant? Joe Rogan has the most listened to show, and it's exclusively on Spotify. Spotify paid $100 million for Joe Rogan's show. And now, since Joe Rogan doesn't just shove the fire hose of corporate and establishment approved misinformation down his throat and his guests' throat, and instead uses his massive, perhaps largest audience in the world in order to tell people the truth and present differing opinions, he is seen as a threat. And then old, washed up, beleaguered boomers who nobody listens to their music anymore, but even at the height of their fame, someone like Neil Young, at the very height of his fame, did not have even a scintilla of the same power and audience that Joe Rogan has. Isn't it hilarious? Now, Neil Young has ripped his music off Spotify, LOL, and is over doing promos for Apple Music. It's almost like it was all coordinated. Yeah, so Joe Rogan released a video last night talking about the quote-unquote scandal, as he has been called, disinformation. It's a pathetic rush by the media in order to try and silence somebody who has more of an audience than they ever will. It's a hysterical rush to try and get musicians canceled from a platform that is allowing free speech. How dangerous is liberty? It's dangerous enough that it must be rationed. In Joe Rogan's comment back to Spotify that he released on his Instagram, he said that he is making this video because a lot of people have distorted misconceptions about what I do.
I think there's a lot of people that have a distorted perception of what I do, maybe based on sound bites or based on headlines of articles that are disparaging. The podcast has been accused of spreading dangerous misinformation, specifically about 2 episodes, a little bit about some other ones, but specifically about 2. One with Dr. Peter McCullough and one with Dr. Robert Malone. Dr. Peter McCullough is a cardiologist, and he is the most published physician in his field in history. Dr. Robert Malone owns 9 patents on the creation of mRNA vaccine technology and is at least partially responsible for the creation of the technology that led to mRNA vaccines. Both these people are very highly credentialed, very intelligent, very accomplished people, and they have an opinion that's different from the mainstream narrative. I wanted to hear what their opinion is.
That sounds like the practicing of free speech in a society that is still presumably protected, a right that we still care about.
The problem I have with the term misinformation, especially today, is that many of the things that we thought of as misinformation just a short while ago are now accepted as fact. Like, for instance, 8 months ago, if you said, if you get vaccinated, you can still catch COVID and you can still spread COVID, you would be removed from social media. They would ban you from certain platforms. Now, that's accepted as fact. If you said, I don't think cloth masks work, you would be banned from social media. Now, that's openly and repeatedly stated on CNN. If you said, I think it's possible that COVID-19 came from a lab, you'd be banned from many social media platforms. Now, that's on the cover of Newsweek. All of those theories that at one point in time were banned were openly discussed by those 2 men that I had on my podcast that have been accused of dangerous misinformation. I do not know if they're right. I don't know, because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. I'm just a person who sits down and talks to people and has conversations with them. Do I get things wrong? Absolutely, I get things wrong, but I try to correct them. Whenever I get something wrong, I try to correct it because I'm interested in telling the truth.
The real story here is that the media is trying to cancel someone who's bigger than them. That's right. Joe Rogan has a larger audience than CNN, MSNBC, and the major networks combined. They're scared of that. They can't control him. He's not part of their agenda machine. He's not part of the machine. And so they want to remove his ladder, okay? They want to climb up to the top rungs of media, and they want to pull the ladder up so that no one else can get there. That's the goal. The goal is to cancel Joe Rogan. And it's not working. It's going to have the opposite effect. I bet that in the following months, Joe Rogan will probably have stronger and better viewership than he has ever had. And obviously, we are supporters of free speech on our show. We have just a small fraction of the audience that Joe Rogan has, but we do love all of you, and thank you all for watching. If you are watching right now, please click subscribe, please click follow, and share our videos. We deeply appreciate it. So in conclusion, what is actually happening here? It has everything to do with the media finding someone who is bigger than them and more powerful than them and has a younger audience than them, and all the metrics show that for Joe Rogan's show, and they want to get him off the air. They want to rip him and slander him and slime him and defame him, libel him and slander him so that they can try and gather or absorb some of their audiences. Now, I have 2 examples of that. I have a clip from CBS News and I have a clip from CNN. Of course, both of these shows and the anchors are behaving like complete jackasses. None of them actually know what they're talking about. None of them have ever listened to Joe Rogan. In fact, the Q-tip at CNN, named Oliver Darcy, sits there and compares Joe Rogan's to a bag of Doritos, and Brian Stelter goes, yeah, that sounds delicious. It's humiliating, embarrassing. These people don't have any power. They don't have the audience of Joe Rogan. It's simply small dick energy. That's all that's happening here, and it's humiliating for the corporate press that they are so obsessed with Joe Rogan right now because they are scared of him.
People who are listening to Joe Rogan's podcast don't necessarily believe it to be bad information. So there was an analogy drawn between Doritos and Joe Rogan's podcast. People know that Doritos are not necessarily good for them. That you're not going to find a nutritional expert who says, you know, you should eat a lot of Doritos. But there are a lot of people who listen to Joe Rogan's podcast who believe that he's actually the truth teller. They believe the opposite, that Joe Rogan is good for an informational diet. And I think that's what's so important, is that the people who are listening to him don't believe it to be bad information. So it's difficult, I guess, for them to make that good choice of consuming information when they think that the podcast hosting people with anti-vaccine rhetoric is really the truth-telling podcast.
Kat, you made the Doritos reference. I rather liked it.
So let me just share with our viewers some of the actual numbers. The CDC says unvaccinated adults are 68 more times at risk of dying than fully vaccinated and boosted adults. Check these out. Hospitalization rates for the unvaccinated, that number shoots up as high as 90 people for every 100,000. So those are the numbers.
So Rogan, those are the facts.
Those are the facts. And I just want to point out that when I had a conversation with Nils yesterday, I asked him and said, some are saying that you're trying to censor Joe Rogan. He's very clear. He believes in the First Amendment. He believes that Joe Rogan and anybody else has a First Amendment right to say whatever they want. He says he doesn't want his music, his artistry associated with the platform that would allow misinformation.
Does he say other artists will follow suit?
He's talking to a lot of artists. We don't have any names yet, but we'll see.
I mean, these musicians are not going to win this battle. Right. You have a First Amendment right to say what you want. You don't have a First Amendment right to appear on a platform as large as Spotify. That's the issue. Joe Rogan is correct that the medical world gets stuff wrong, but there's a process by which the medical world corrects itself, and that process is not interviewing guys on the fringe of the medical world on your massive platform. That's called irresponsible. It's not censorship. Right. Editors are not censors. They're ensuring quality.
The other problem, too, is people say, well, just turn it off. You don't have to listen to it. The thing is, a lot of people do listen to it, and they're getting false, incorrect information, and that's why it seems so dangerous.
And it matters.
Huge reach. He has a huge reach. He just says he's having a conversation. But that's what Joe Rogan will say.
Yeah, but it's a life or death issue. That's why it's in a special category. It's not an opinion about space or something.
Well, we have some facts coming up. Dr. David Agus will join us to answer your questions about COVID. We'll be right back.
My solution for all of this, of course, and it's very simple, bring Dr. Fauci on Joe Rogan's show. That's the only solution here. The only real way for you, all of you sad, miserable libs who are sobbing and crying your eyes out that there is someone who practices free speech on a daily basis and has his rights, to do so, the only solution is for your Jesus, your savior, your false prophet, and your golden calf, Dr. Fauci, to take his ass, teeny, small, little, elf on a shelf ass, over to Joe Rogan's show to sit down and do a 3-hour interview, and to have Dr. Fauci get asked a couple uncomfortable questions. That's the solution. Will you agree to do that? Then I think, then Dr. Fauci could own Joe Rogan, right, with the facts. I think that's really the only honest solution. Again, we deeply, deeply support Joe Rogan and the practicing of free speech. What can you do? If you're going to have a show, the purpose of free speech is that it's going to make you uncomfortable. In fact, free speech that you disagree with is the only speech worth protecting, because that means the speech is actually free. In closing, we have another quote here from Vladimir Lenin. We started off with a quote from Lenin about how dangerous freedom is. Another quote from Vladimir Lenin: the press should be not only a collective propagandist and a collective agitator, but it should also be a collective organizer of the masses. The press is upset that they can't get the last notch in their belt there. The real media, the real organizer of masses, the people who have real audiences, those people are not them. But boy, they tick the first boxes really well, don't they? Collective propagandists and agitators. That is precisely what they're doing to Joe Rogan. Leninist's dream is to just use the media as a weapon. That is what the sad and miserable, bitter, bitchy, small dick energy communists are doing right now to Joe, and I think it's only going to make him stronger.
Thank you for watching. We are 100% independent news. Are you sick of being lied to? We certainly are. That's why we started this channel. But we can't do it without you. We can't keep going without your help. All we ask is that you click like and subscribe and share this video. It's free, and it keeps us going, it keeps us growing, and it keeps us getting the truth out there to break the rotted corporate media infrastructure that wants to lie to you every single day, wants to corrupt your narratives, your truth, your story, and your very society. So support us by clicking like, clicking subscribe, and thank you, patrons.